you weren't aware, there's an entire subgenre of the human species who spent the last 10 or 20 years or so believing every single thing that they've seen online without any real verification or justification necessary. That's right, there are seriously people out there who've built their every single social interaction around the fine art of weirding people out with some of the most blood-curdling, spine-tingling bits of information that they could find whilst on their endless scroll. People who can't just go one family function without getting shunned to the kids' table, only to give that entire table nightmares of Hillary Clinton coming to get them in their sleep. People who can't help themselves but be lured down a rabbit hole knowing the only viable outcome to be a schizophrenia diagnosis and keep going down it anyways until even the voices in their head are part of a grander conspirator. People you may know as conspiracy theorists. Unsurprisingly, this subgenre of folk have spent much of that time ridiculed by their blue-pilled peers under the presumption that, well, there's no way any of that is even remotely true. Like, come on, let's be real here. Which, in all fairness, is a fair point. Nonetheless, even in the face of record-breaking parental disappointment as they watch you iPad baby out with your little cousins to Alex Jones clips at Christmas dinner, many of these theorists have carried on spewing their crazy conspiracies all this time for no clear collective reasoning, more than simply being freaky like that. But this is all surely no new phenomenon. Kicking out the hose with your horrific tidbits is as old as, well, autism itself. It's pretty interesting to think about how all the great conspiracies we know today must have originally started by just word of mouth and shit. Guess what I heard? The CIA's been abducting children and feeding them drugs and other children or whatever. Oh my god. Where'd you hear this? This is insane. This should be front page news right here. Oh, just my neighbor told me about it. Yeah, he says the walls tell him all sorts of wacky shit. You know, I always did have a suspicion they were up to no good. I know, right? Though it's definitely on the internet that conspiracy theories and those obsessed found themselves at home and began to make some proper progress. For the past couple of decades on sites like 4chan and others that I can only assume were made before the internet had more, nerds from all over the globe have gathered to recycle on bits of information fed to them by literally any source possible. Like any at all whatsoever. Like you could really spurt any shit as long as you have no certification at all, because isn't that kind of the point of a conspiracy theory in the first place? Together with each other and time, and really just way too much time on their hands mostly. Through rigorous he say she say dissection, researching paper trails left by billionaires cause boomers can't control alt delete a damn thing, and Instagram reel editing to inform the masses. Eventually a collective picture was painted of some of society's greatest secrets. And funny enough, it turns out that they were more or less right about more or less most of it all along. Secret societies, mind control experiments, banking systems, all exposed by the internet to the point now where not even the guilty parties completely deny the validity of these conspiracies anymore. Only just blame it on the unks who worked their exact same jobs a generation before them. All of that crazy schizo information they've been weirding out the hose with all this time was actually totally factually accurate. With way too much time for this shit, the internet eventually deciphered some of the greatest global mysteries before anybody else had a clue in the slightest. If only the hose knew that then, am I right? I feel like in a way we all sort of owe conspiracy theorists for their work, which turns out to have been somewhat worthwhile for them to do in the end. Except for flat earthers, of course, which are still seen as beyond retarded till this day. In almost every other single way, they were right on the dollar sign about just too much. Spending years with so much conviction and so little reason, conspiracists have been almost vindicated. Again, for the most part. And so to all of thou who may be watching right now, congratulations, I guess. But good luck, and I'm sorry. But then again, like, what the f? Yeah, it's a great time for no one really. Especially looking at it from right now, I feel like I grew up into the current affair discourse at a good time, all things considered. Sure, it was polarizing as f and sort of gay, but at least it was a little bit more digestible on little old me at the time. Turns out that that social divide was in factually just a manufactured cultural segregation of the people fabricated by elites using worldwide media conglomerates as propaganda machines all this time, but at least it was just that little bit more digestible on the old prefrontal I was working with back then. Particularly when you compare that to all the youngins having to get to know the world these days. Thanks to a boatload of conspiracies, it's now objectively true that the way I knew to be the way things weren't in the slightest even nearly so. And that all these kids will be forced to watch the entire world stage go sicko mode before their very young eyes through their iPads and be forced to build all of that into their ideological identities. And that's just sort of how things are now. There's no such thing as having just faith in the system once you've learned how the nuggets are made. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, like, what can you really do about it? I mean, they do say that reality is always stranger than fiction. And at this point, I'm not even sure if Stephen King could come up with half of this shit. But then again, maybe that's exactly how he did. It's definitely strange times for all of us, and I'm not sure if anybody knows what to do with all this information, which might be exactly why nothing has happened as a result. In a roundabout way, it must be a bittersweet victory for, well, most of us really, now knowing the extent of the pure decrepitness of human nature. But beyond that, when you think about all the conspiracists who've built themselves a personality and maybe even a couple e-ships out of believing the most out there blatant bullshit that they could possibly find online, who are now stuck with nothing new to hit the forums with. It's all sort of been actually proven by the parties involved a generation after the fact, and now it feels like there's not much left to illogically, wholeheartedly believe. Something tells me that deep down there's a part of every conspiracist that was sad to see their own little secret society of exclusive information become general knowledge. There's no way in hell that the cause was all so entirely selfless. This strange passion clearly served all of them a deeper individual purpose. Perhaps a sense of vigilante justice to make them feel like that cape and costume they've tucked under their bed they got for a reason. Or perhaps, although they are weird, at least there's people out there a whole lot weirder. I feel like what conspiracy theorists got out of theorizing serves something far deeper than facts ever could, and that many of them wouldn't have given up on it no matter what. But to most of our surprises, that unfathomable determination to theorizing is exactly what's brought us so much more information about the nugget making machine labeled as society. But imagine how it must feel for all of them to finally be vindicated, just to be mentally disregarded by everybody anyway. I mean, surely that must feel like a slap to the face. But hey, it's not like they were doing it for the pussy anyways. One thing that I've picked up on through my many friendships to these professionally schizoidal folk and my own time online is how conspiracies is definitely a spectrum, going from fun and goofy history to spiritual philosophy to downright catastrophic, at which at the end lies a particular point where everything you've been told by someone else is subject to a hidden agenda, which to me is about as retarded as believing that none of it's real. Though it's still obviously evident that the general public is at a point now where they don't even actually try to differentiate fantasy from fiction as they scroll on the web. And so naturally all this work done by the good kind of nosy person, with the expectation in mind that surely there'll be a whole collapse to the world system or whatever, simply gets processed through everybody else's brain as more of any other type of dopamine slop and disregarded of without any sort of mental deviation in thought whatsoever. And you can blame that fact on this or that, but at the end of the day, I have to give it to them. It's kind of genius how in the know that they couldn't keep the lid on their preposterously sized list of bullshit that the CIA was up to. They instead just added flat earthers to the mix to make everybody look stupid. Or at least that's my theory, and part of a greater, grander conspiracy that I've been seeing online a lot as of late, and one that strikes home to the core philosophy of conspiracy, one that you could very well call the final online conspiracy. How everything you hear, see, and touch around you is, of course, a psyop. A psychological operation used to subtly influence your perception of reality by higher-ups. And it's definitely a little out there, at least on paper. But when you really think about it, it's not anything that's outside of the scope of what can or has been happening. At a time where we have access to infinite information, solutions, and enough unblighted potatoes to make it through any winter, you can't just put people in cages and still expect them to respect you. That is, unless you psyop the shit out of every single one of their asses. Which turns out to be surprisingly easy. And if you think about it, isn't marketing one of the most over-applied to college courses in the planet? Kind of just how to psyop 101. When I see a giant whopper on the side of a bus, it's still gonna make me hungry no matter how wise I am to the fact that in reality it'll look nothing like that. I'm still gonna be fiending for a slab of horse meat with a sip of Kool-Aid at the end of the day. Which begs the question, is there really a difference between what is systemic and what we do unto ourselves at a certain point? Whose fault is it when you get caught into a cage you voluntarily crawled into? And that, of course, is the beautiful line that a good psyop expertly toes. But then you got all these folk talking about how even memes are psyopted at this point, which, you know, hopefully not. That definitely wouldn't be good news for me. I mean, just imagine how shit this video would be without a constant distractions away from my ass face. Don't worry, the only thing I'm trying to take your attention off of is this fat ass pimple on my nose. Ah, You know, I feel like we can only say that conspiracists were right all along because it used to be such a fringe group of outcasts that any and all similarity between stories was something worth celebrating. A sentiment of common ground in the face of all common sense. Any bit was plenty enough. But now that being a conspiracy theorist doesn't result in an immediate spit in your face, I've seen a lot of these folks online getting a bit too big for their boots. You know, Personally, I'm of the opinion that of course it's all a little bit more truer than it's not. But I still don't feel like it's a good time for conspiracy theorists to go and get ahead of themselves. Still, I keep seeing all these conspiracists call every single other conspiracy that they're not totally on board with a psyop, made to make all of them look mad. As if there's anything that could make them look madder than they just naturally do. But that's exactly why it's in their best interest till this day to stick together. Bar the flat earthers, of course, because that one most definitely is. I mean, if you really wanted to delve into it, wouldn't the best psyop then be to get everybody to believe that every other conspiracy is indeed a psyop? What I'm trying to get at is something that all of the greatest conspiracists should never ever forget. And that's that you should never let a psyop get in the way of your true buffoonery. Needless to say, it's been a wild couple of years for 4chaners. And I'm sure that it's the turn of events that not even they could have totally expected. And the only thing you can really take away from it is that in reality is the strangest case scenario. The world will never fail to find a way to surprise you in every conceivable way possible. But then again, what would be the fun in if it couldn't? Because of that though, I still can't stand all these folk who talk about how it's all proven, man. Like, no, it's not, and that's been the point all along. Nothing's ever proven, and that's exactly what it's all about. Because don't the best conspiracies directly imply those with the ability to verify them in the first place? Which is also my argument against flat earthism. I mean, I can literally see the horizon from here. But you get what I mean. I mean, in my opinion, none of this should be a matter of opinion. We are way outside of the scope of the regular political discourse that I grew up with, and far more in the realm of like a melatonin dream sequence in which we all call home. But that's why it's fun. That's why it's such a cool conversation to have with your boys. Hating on all other conspiracies as if it wasn't all just a bunch of unverified campfire tales until about a week ago does nobody any good. I don't know why the 9/11 guys and the Pizzagate guys wouldn't be on the same page listening and learning from each other. Like, why wouldn't you be working together anymore? But instead at each other's throat in every single comment section as if you're trying to be part of the wildest conspiracy out there. Like, can we not all just take a step back and recognize the collective common enemy in all of this? To be Hillary Clinton, of course. But now that all these conspiracies aren't too crazy and essentially everybody's a conspiracy theorist, it's only a matter of time before, like anything to find a community online, that sense of a common end goal manifested in its early days goes away as that community gives into the divisive nature of the internet once and for all. It's unfortunate for many reasons that we're at a stage now that there's no conspiracies left at all, really. Only giant global cover-ups. And those who made it all happen don't even get an annual parade. When every rock's been overturned and still the cheese pizzas serve extra saucy, who'd have thought that after all of that, conspiracy theorists themselves would be the only conspiracy left? Of all time then just be to get people to believe that every other psyop that's not a psyop is a psyop?